bow down, and every chain will break as broken hearts declare His praise. For who can stop the Lord Almighty? Our God is a lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles. Every knee will bow before Him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sin of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Oh, every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. So open up the gates, make way before the King of Kings. Our God who comes to save is here to set the captives free. For who can stop the Lord Almighty? Our God is a lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles. Every knee will bow before Him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sin of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Oh, every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? 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 Come on. Our God is a Lamb of Judah, that's roaring with power and fighting our battles. Every knee will bow before Him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sin of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Oh, every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Wednesday, my devotions book was the Lord's Prayer, which is probably my favourite part of the scripture, because someone comes to me and talks about our obligation to God, our obligation to our fellow people, and things to come to ourselves. And it spoke about, particularly about, give us this day our daily bread. Now, as Christians, it doesn't matter what country we're in, everybody has some sort of prayer. And the prayer for daily strength is what's important. So on April the 1st, the last day of March, I was able to go and visit my wife in hospital, but since then, due to the wonders of technology, we've been FaceTiming. So I'm looking forward to the 15th. I think the lockdown ends then. But we just, it was so important to get this message straight from the Lord's Prayer that the provision that God makes for us is to live each day as it comes. And I thank Him for that inspiration.
Each day as it comes.
I want to add a little bit to what John was saying earlier. I found myself reflecting a fair bit on passing the Duke of Edinburgh, and I'm fairly indifferent to the English monarchy. I think a lot of British monarchy. So I don't know if you get it right. And I remember actually walking the Camino and hung out with
Thanks, Brett. So I want to welcome all our online viewers now. We're going to sing Jesus Strong and Kind. It's nice to have you with us, folks, if you're watching from close or from far. Yeah, we might sing this song. Jesus said that if I thirst, I should come to him. No one else can satisfy. I should come to him. Jesus said, if I am weak, I should come to him. No one else can be my strength. I should come to him. For the Lord is good and faithful. He will keep us day and night. We can always come to Jesus, Jesus strong and kind. Jesus said that if I fear, I should come to him. No one else can be my shield. I should come to him. For the Lord is good and faithful. He will keep us day and night. We can always run to Jesus, Jesus strong and kind. Jesus said, if I am lost, he will come to me. And he showed me on that cross, he will come to me. For the Lord is good and faithful. He will keep us day and night. We can always run to Jesus, Jesus strong and kind. The Lord is good and faithful. He will keep us day and night. We can always run to Jesus, Jesus strong and kind. Jesus strong and kind. So the band's going to play a song called Because He Lives, which is something that Doug suggested because we're immediately post-Easter. It's a perfect song for us to listen to. While we take up the offering, feel free to sing along.
Reading from Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 to 16. A story about workers. God's kingdom is like an estate manager who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. They agreed on a wage of $1 a day and went to work. Later, about 9 o'clock, the manager saw some other men hanging around the town square, unemployed. He told them to go to work in his vineyard and he would pay them a fair wage. They went. He did the same thing at noon and again at 3 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, he went back and found still others standing around. He said, "Why are you standing around all day doing nothing?" They said, "Because no one hired us." He told them to go to work in his vineyard. When the day's work was over, the owner of the vineyard instructed his foreman, "Call the workers in and pay them their wages. Start with the last hired and go to the first." Those hired at 5 o'clock came up and were each given $1. When those who were hired first saw that, they assumed they would get far more. But they got the same, each of them $1. Taking the $1, they groused angrily to the manager, "These last workers put in only 1 easy hour, and you just made them equal to us, who slaved all day under a scorching sun." He replied to the one speaking for the rest, "Friend, I haven't been unfair. We agreed on the wage of $1, didn't we? So take it and go. I decided to give to the one who came last the same as you. Can't I do what I want with my own money? Are you going to get stingy because I am generous?" Here it is again, the great reversal. Many of the first ending up last, and the last first.
My poor ears have to manage wearing my glasses, wearing this headset, and wearing a mask at the moment, and it's a little bit tricky. So I'm very glad that at least in speaking this morning, I get to be mask-free for some time. But I'll try and make it quick, and I think it's going to be a bit quick, but we'll see how we go. And we're launching our new sermon series this morning. It'll go for the next 4 weeks, and it's called "This Is My Story." Well, I had the privilege just a few weeks ago of sharing some of my story with our in-person family here at church, and it's my privilege now this morning to start the This Is My Story sermon series. So if I can, I'd like to start This Is My Story with a story. When I was in my final year of high school, the school walkway frames were decorated with inspiring quotes like, "Shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you'll land upon the stars," or "Nothing is impossible, the word itself says, I'm possible." One of these cheesy quotes was something to the effect of, "Life is a book and you are its author," which on first glance sounds like a nice enough phrase, but the more I read it, the more I wrestled with it. See, something about attributing to myself the authorship of my life's story seemed wrong. If life is a book, I remember thinking, I don't want to be holding the pen. Our This Is My Story series is based on Hebrews 12:2, which says, "Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith." Now, this verse gives us two crucial pieces of information to help us understand the theme of this series. Number one, Jesus is the author of our faith, emphasis on author. The pen's not in our incapable hands, but in his very capable hands. He is in charge of my story. And number two, Jesus is the author of our faith, emphasis on faith. This inherently underpins my story. If my life were a book, then Jesus has made it so faith would be that book's genre. He is the topic of my story. So where do we begin? Where does our story start? There's the beginning of the greatest story ever told, the story of our salvation, which starts with, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Or there's your fairy tale beginning of, "Once upon a time in a land far, far away." And then there's your story, my story. Where do we start? Well, as we just read in the parable of the workers in the vineyard, Matthew 20, 1-19, and I had it pasted here, but I don't think I want to read through it again. It was really cool because Andrew was reading the Message version, and we had, I believe it was NIV up on the screen, and so we're able to see those differences come through. But what I love about reading this story is how relevant it is to this series, how relevant it is to knowing where does our story start and how to find that beginning. And let me explain what I'm thinking here. I don't know about you guys, but if I was one of the early workers in the story, I would absolutely have been complaining. Why would I put in a hard day's work if for the same pay as the guy next to me, I could have clocked just an hour's shift? But Jesus isn't suggesting unfair employment terms in this story. There's something so much greater happening here. He's emphasizing that when you pass the pen over to God, it doesn't matter how many pages deep you are in your own story, he will take it, transform it, and from that point on, cover to cover, that story is his. So when you pass the pen over to God, it doesn't matter how many pages deep you are, it doesn't matter how much you've written of your own story, of your own hand. God takes that and transforms your book cover to cover and writes your story with you and for you. The parable tells us that it doesn't matter where or when you start because the reward is the same. We receive the assurance of our salvation and the promise of heaven, no matter where our beginning lies. We receive everything that God has set and planned for us, and we receive the fullness of joy in Christ. My all-time favorite quote was by a man with a really tricky name to pronounce, so I'm going to try here, and I hope I don't butcher it. But his name was Rabindranath Tagore, and he said, "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I woke and found that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. Let's unpack that a bit. I slept and dreamt that life was joy. What a dream, right? In an ideal world, life would equal joy. Our cup would always be overflowing. Everything would always be okay. Happiness would always be our reality. It's not. But imagine, what would it look like if life was always joy? It's tempting to think it would look like, winning the lottery and not being bound by financial burden. If I had $1 for every time I've said something along the lines of, if I won the lottery, then I probably wouldn't need to win the lottery. It's tempting to think that it would look like having good health and not being bound by sickness or pain or the restraints of the human body and the human experience. Or it's tempting to think that joy would look like popularity, where everyone would like me and I could do no social wrong. Maybe your idea of life as always being joy would be having confidence in your appearance or confidence in your talent and abilities, confidence in job security. But maybe the more we idealize this life, the less our cup seems to have. It goes from overflowing to maybe an optimistic half full to a disheartened half empty, and maybe even less. The fact is this: dreaming that life is joy does not bring joy. In fact, the dream is so jarringly different to our reality that it can lessen our view of what we do have. We have to wake up from that dream sometime. And when we do, life has a lot of expectations on us. Life is full of responsibility, full of requirements. We are bound to doing. That's what we hear in the next line. I woke and found that life was service. But if we read further through Matthew 20, verses 26 to 28 reveal that final piece to the puzzle. It says, instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Whoever wants to be first must be your slave. So whoever wants to be first is in engaging in service. They're picking up an action. There's a decision, there's a responsibility, and there's a requirement to do. The final part of my favorite quote says, I acted, and behold, service was joy. I did, and I found that the doing was joy. I started, and I found that the beginning was joy. So where do our stories start? They start with deciding. They start with acting. They start with doing, and they end with joy. The result is joy. Over the next few weeks, we're going to explore different parts to our story and what makes our story. And it doesn't matter where your story starts. What matters is that you decide to start. What have you decided to start? What have I decided to start? What do I need to take up? What practice do I need to put into place to make my story central to the theme of faith? Maybe I need to start reading the pages of my Bible more often. Maybe I need to cultivate a practice of prayer. Maybe you're nodding along and thinking, yeah, me too. What do I need to start to know that I am dedicating myself to the promise that God is making my book cover to cover a story centered on faith? How do I align with that purpose? I shared earlier about the quotes that decorated the overhead beams on our school walkway when I was in grade 12. The Life is a Book and You Are Its Author quote always sat uncomfortably with me, because if I was the author of my story, I would be pretty terrible at it. Actually, the fact that I'm alive and well and that life is good for me right now is pretty well proof that someone else is writing my story, because this isn't my penmanship. It's not. This isn't what my story would have looked like if I was in control, and it's proof that someone else has to be. This isn't my penmanship. Well, the ending to that story of the quotes on the walkway beams in my high school is I was walking through, and I think it had been just after a conference where I'd been particularly wrestling with the fact that I'm giving that pen over to God. I'm attributing authorship of my life to someone greater than me. And I'd been wrestling with that, and I walk under this walkway and I notice, not that I condone vandalism, but this quote had been partially ripped down. And it was a bit of a sign. Actually, I'm not the author of my own story, or at least I don't want to be. I want to attribute that to someone else. I want to hand over the pen, and I want to decide to start something greater. I want to start with a better chapter. Well, the worship team are going to come up and join us as we're going to sing. I believe we're going to sing You Rescued Me. Thanks, Neil. And my prayer for you as we're singing these words and as we're reflecting on this is that you might think about, at what point are you in your story? What chapter do you think you're up to? What season of life are you in right now, and what chapter heading would that be in your book? And what is it that you need to start? Maybe you need to hand over the pen. It's very easy to say, God, you can totally take control of my life, but it's also very easy to kind of grab the pen and try and write at the same time. And that just sounds like scribble, right? It's not going to get anyone anywhere. So I know for me and myself, I want to give God the pen completely, take a step back and say, this is my story, and I'll just participate. I'll be the protagonist, but you can be the author, because I don't want to be anymore. His penmanship is so much greater than mine, and I'm excited to see what the next pages hold. And I hope you are too. Why don't you stand with me and sing, or if you're singing along at home, maybe feel free to close your eyes and join us in singing. We can't hear you, but it's a gathered worship. It's a united worship. And thanks, team, for taking us in this.
You rescued me and picked me up, and living hope of grace revealed, and life transformed in righteousness. Oh Lord, you have rescued me, forgiven me. You healed my heart and set me free from sin and death. You brought me life. You've made me whole. Oh Lord, you have rescued rescued me. You rescued me and picked me up, a living hope of grace revealed, a life transformed in righteousness. Oh Lord, you have rescued me, forgiving me. You hear my heart and set me free from sin and death. You've brought me life, you've made me whole. Oh Lord, you have rest. Let's stand up now. And you loved me before I knew you, and you knew before all time. I've been created in your image, oh Lord. And you bought me and you sought me. Your blood poured out for me. New creation in your image, oh Lord. You rescued me. You rescued me. You rescued me. Yes. You rescued me. Dear Lord, as we contemplate our own stories today, we thank you for rescuing each one of us. We each have a different thing that you've rescued us from, our story. We each have a different thing that you've picked us up from, our story. You know each story. You know our heart. Help us to be worthy of that picking up, that rescuing. Help us to tell your story. Amen. Graham's going to come and bring the announcements now.
Just a couple of announcements for this coming week. Hopefully they'll come up on the screen. Youth camp's coming up. So if any of the young people are interested in that, see Amy. Space to Call Home is on today after church. Any inquiries, see Kylie. Anzac Day service is coming up, of course, on the 25th of April, and there'll be no service here, no in-person service that day, but there will be a pre-recorded service online. But we encourage you, and the band will be involved with the Anzac Day service up at the memorial. So if you're able to, I encourage you to attend that service. Wes and Debbie and family will be on annual leave again this week and up to next weekend, up to and including next weekend. But by the wonders of modern technology, Wes will bring the message next Sunday morning. So there will be a message tomorrow, next Sunday. May God bless you each in all that you do for him this coming week.
We're going to close this morning's service. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Amy, for your message. It was really appreciated. We're going to sing Shout to the Lord, and we might stand up to do that.
So you can be on your way. It's been great to have you here this morning. And say a prayer for Brett and I this week. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks. Bye.